thrust at liftoff. Now, those boosters in the core stage got us going from 0 to over 17,000 miles per hour in just about 8 minutes. And then once all that propellant was depleted, the responsibility was passed on to the interim cryogenic propulsion stage. Now, the first job of the ICPS was to perform a perigee raise maneuver. And this means that we're getting into a low Earth circular orbit that allows us to deploy those solar panels, start harvesting energy, and do systems checkouts to make sure that we are ready for our journey. And we stayed in that orbit for about 30 minutes, and then we did our translunar injection burn. This is the primary responsibility of the ICPS because it gives us the energy to escape low Earth orbit and commits us on a path out to the moon. Now, once it completed that burn, the ICPS separated from the Orion, and it performed one final burn to completely leave the Earth-Moon system. And after doing that, Orion was on its way out to the moon. So it spent about 4 days heading out towards the moon. And then we quickly dipped in about 60 miles above the surface of the moon and did an outbound powered flyby. Now, that powered flyby means that we're taking advantage of the speed we already have, the gravity of the moon, and the energy we get from the service module's engines in order to target our orbit. And the orbit that we were targeting is called a DRO, or a distant retrograde orbit. And what that means of moving counterclockwise relative to the Earth, like the moon does naturally, we are moving clockwise. So we're going in this opposite direction. That's what retrograde means. And distant means that we are going farther away than we have with any human spacecraft before. We're orbiting about 38,000 miles above the surface of the moon. And this is a really convenient orbit because we were able to stay there without having to use a ton of fuel for station keeping. And it also provides a safe, efficient path back home when we're ready. So this allowed us to learn how to operate in deep space, one of the core tenets of this mission. And then once we were ready, we started our trip back home. So we performed one more powered flyby, this time targeting our return, where we lit up those engines as we dipped close to the surface of the moon. And then we began our return transit, which took about 7 days, and that leads us to today. So next time we'll talk a bit more about what that return looks like and what our entry is actually going to look like. But until then, back to you.
Thank you, Philip. And again, a live view of Orion closing in on planet Earth, now about 11,000 miles away from Earth, as it continues a very, very precise trajectory for a splashdown that is scheduled at 11:39 and 42 seconds a.m. Central Time this morning. For Orion, launch from the Kennedy Space Center occurred on November 16th on the world's most powerful rocket, the Space Launch System. The first outbound powered flyby of the moon was performed 5 days later on November 21st, dipping to within about 81 miles of the lunar surface. That placed Orion on a very precise trajectory for its ultimate goal, that racetrack trajectory called the distant retrograde orbit that would allow Orion the time and the space environment needed to test its mettle. 4 days later, Orion executed an engine firing to enter into that orbit, and the next day, Orion surpassed the record set during Apollo 13 52 years ago for the greatest distance ever traveled by a human-rated spacecraft designed to return humans to the Earth. On November 28th, Orion reached its farthest distance from the Earth, some 268,000 miles, before departing the distant retrograde orbit on December 1st. And this past Monday, Orion conducted a 3-minute, 27-second engine firing behind the moon to whip around Earth's closest neighbor for the final leg of its flight, passing to within 80 miles of the surface, turning for home, and its splashdown that is scheduled just 1 hour, 21 minutes, 44 seconds from now. The initial mission of the Artemis 1 program was always designed to be a test flight, wringing out all of the systems of the Space Launch System and the Orion spacecraft, and for more than 25 days it did just that, setting the stage for a crew to board an Orion vehicle for a trip around the moon in 2 years. So with that, out in the Pacific, where Orion will be splashing down not long from now, we're going to go back here in a moment to Daryl Nail, who's standing by with one of the first persons that will actually be in the water to execute the recovery and the securing of the Orion spacecraft. Daryl?
That's right, Rob, and his name is Wayne Shearer, and he is the Navy diver first class aboard boat number 2. He is the lead on one of the 2 small boats called Cricks, which are essentially small inflatable Navy boats. He's just about 20 or so minutes away from getting into that boat. Thank you, Wayne, for coming up here and making some time for us to tell us about the operation today.
Of course, sir.
So tell me exactly how your team goes about securing this spacecraft after it comes back from space, splashes down the water just a few miles from us.
Well, a sequence of events are going to go splash down, wait 2 hours. We're going to do a hazard analysis, make sure there's no gas coming off of it. We're going to come up, take those pictures like you said earlier for those engineering purposes. Once that's done, then we put the what's called a pony collar on it, and then basically it's a sequence of events of pulling all those ropes out like you said earlier and pulling it into the well deck. Easy day.
Easy day, and we know that there are certainly going to be some challenges, right? Seas are 4 to 5 foot currently, which is within your limit. Let's take a look now underneath the well deck to the boats that are currently being prepared. You're really literally going to be going down here and right to that boat after we conclude our interview. How will you manage the 4 to 5 foot seas with a bobbing spacecraft and bobbing inflatable boat with your team?
Well, this is just another day in the park for us. You know, we've trained for the last year and a half for this. We've been in worse seas than this, recovering anything under the water. It's just different. Instead of recovering something from under the water, we're going to recover something that fell from the sky.
You can see on our screen, those are the tip edges of your 2 inflatable boats. I imagine you'll be positioned somewhere towards the front or back?
I'll be positioned toward the middle of the boat.
Towards the middle of the boat. And as you do this operation, have you thought about just the importance of it, reflecting that it is you who will be one of the first people to put your hands on a spacecraft that just came back from space?
I mean, definitely, this is probably every kid's little dream, or every little kid's dream, to be able to do exactly what I'm doing today, you know, and I think I can speak for the whole dive team that we're honored to be part of history and to be part of something so monumentous, and just ready and excited to go out and do this.
On a personal note, you and I were talking about how you got into the Navy and the dive team. What was it that motivated you to become a Navy diver, and then ultimately, now that you're on this operation, looking back at that choice?
Well, February 2003 from Leesville, Louisiana, and I heard a loud boom outside my window one morning, and I ran outside and talked to my dad, and a few hours later we're watching the news, and unfortunately what we heard was the USS Columbia break up. So, you know, it was not a great thing to hear, but it kind of jump-started my career of like, hey, what do I want to do? And I wanted to be out there to help people, and the Navy just kind of fell into my lap. And, you know, 20 years later, to be able to be part of history of the first next thing we've flown into space like that is absolutely a dream come true for myself.
Certainly a tragedy for NASA, one that has created many lessons learned for our agency, but interesting that it led you into this.
They have around the world.
And briefly, Wayne, as you look out here to the Pacific Ocean, where you will literally be in the water in just a few minutes, will you be sharing any words with your team?
Good luck, be safe, and let's be part of history.
All right, we wish you the best. Wayne, thank you for taking the time, and good luck out there.
Thank you, sir.
Rob, we'll send it back to you.
Thanks, Daryl. It looks like a great day out in the Pacific, west of Baja, California, where Orion is headed. And you can't beat this view, though. The view of the Earth, where Orion is headed, tried and true on a pinpoint course for a splashdown just 1 hour and 16 minutes from now. After Orion enters the Earth's atmosphere at the conclusion of this 25-and-a-half-day mission, the spacecraft is going to rely on a very heavily tested parachute system to slow down its speed and allow for a very gentle splashdown. Koki Machin, the chief engineer of Orion's parachute assembly system, now describes the process and the path to the certification of the parachute system. A series of 11 parachutes will be deployed in sequential fashion. A very dramatic return to Earth lying ahead for the Orion spacecraft.
Our design is almost exactly the Apollo design. The shape of the mains the shape of the drogues. The only major difference is we are bigger. Apollo weighed roughly 13,500 pounds, and we weigh 22 and change thousand pounds. And so our parachutes are larger because we have more energy to take out of the system, and our parachutes are stronger. So at a fundamental level, all round parachutes are alike. The Orion system has drogue parachutes that initially decelerate the system, and because they're deployed at a much higher velocity, they're made of ribbons. The ribbons can take the fluttering associated with high velocity deployments much better than a solid canopy can. And once the system slows down, it deploys the mains. The mains are much closer to a personnel chute. They're called ring sails. The major difference would be that a personnel chute could be 28 to 30 feet in diameter, and a CPAS main is 116 feet in diameter. So the Orion parachutes are what we refer to as hybrid parachutes. The drag surfaces are nylon, but then the structural grid, how we take the drag on that nylon surface and transmit it down to the vehicle, is made of Kevlar. And Kevlar is quite a bit stronger and stiffer, and it just completely different material than the drag surfaces are. So the CPAS system is designed to safely recover the crew with just 2 mains deployed. The problem with deploying the backup chute after you deploy the first 2 chutes is you have to negotiate the chute that's already out there. So what we chose to do, and what Apollo chose to do, was to deploy the backup chute with the main system itself. And as a result, we get a much softer landing when all the parachutes work properly. But both systems were designed to land with just 2 main parachutes functioning. When we did the pad abort test at White Sands, I was quite scared. But I wasn't scared for our system. I was scared for the repositioning after the rockets took off the capsule and repositioned it. It was perfect. That thing reoriented like it was on rails. And I swear to you, this huge relief came over me when the cover came off, because I thought, wow, we're not done, but we're done. I know this system's going to work.
And there again, the view of the Earth. We're about 33 minutes away from the first big milestone. That will be the separation of the crew module and the service module, signaling the beginning of Orion's entrance into the home stretch of its 1.4 million mile journey. With us at this hour is the Deputy Associate Administrator for Exploration Systems, Kathy Kerner. Kathy, thanks for joining us this morning. It's great to see you.
Glad to be here.
You know, this is a little bit of deja vu for you. You were a flight director in this room for a number of years. Your thoughts as Orion approaches the end of this maiden flight?
Yeah, certainly a lot of history in human spaceflight has been made in this room, and we're making some more today. And really excited. There's a lot of energy in the room, and it's very familiar, but it's also very different as we step into this next episode in human exploration.
You know, the mission had its trials and tribulations getting off the ground, but once it did, so far, so good. The mission has exceeded expectations in many areas. Of course, the post-flight analysis is yet to come, but from the top level, the 1,000-foot level, looking down at the mission, what are your thoughts about what has been accomplished in setting the stage for a crewed mission 2 years from now?
Absolutely, this has been a phenomenal mission thus far. If you asked me to grade it, I'd give us an A+. I think that the work that has been performed both by the Exploration Ground Systems team, the SLS team, and the Orion team has been fantastic. We've been learning how the spacecraft operates. We've been learning how to fly this amazing machine, and it's gone so well that we've actually been able to add tests during the mission that help expand the envelope that we're going to be able to use to operate the spacecraft once we have crew on board.
The major objective of the mission lies ahead. That's the rigorous testing of the heat shield, as we've just seen in our features. 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit building up around the spacecraft, twice as much as space shuttles endured when they re-entered the Earth's atmosphere. How do you think it's all going to fare, and what then needs to be done to analyze the performance of the heat shield in certifying that we are good to put a crew on board in a couple of years?
So this test, this is the primary objective of this test mission, but we've got a lot more objectives that we need to accomplish between now and when we launch crew. We have an environmental test that we need to conduct of the entire integrated spacecraft once we get the environmental and life support systems on board. So this is just one of many tests that we have going forward, and one of many analyses that we need to do with all of the post-flight data that we retrieve from the spacecraft.
We opened up the broadcast paying homage to Apollo 17 landing on the moon 50 years ago today. It's only coincidence that this happened, but it seems very appropriate, doesn't it?
It does. It seems fitting that we would honor Apollo with the new legacy of the Artemis generation and this mission today.
Thanks very much, Kathy. Kathy Kerner, the Deputy Associate Administrator for Exploration Systems, and we're nearing the end of the home stretch here of this very first mission.
Thanks, Rob. Great to be here.
And as the Earth grows larger and larger in the field of view, Orion continues its trek back home with crew module, service module separation just 30 minutes from now. Entry interface just 20 minutes after that. In the meantime, let's go back out to the Pacific, the destination for Orion today, where Darrell Nail from the Kennedy Space Center, again embedded with the exploration ground systems and recovery teams, is standing by with Shannon Walker, NASA astronaut.
Well operations. All hands uninvolved, staying clear of wing walls, vehicle storage areas.
That's right, Rob. Shannon Walker, NASA astronaut, has been on board since we departed on Wednesday to come out to the site. Thank you for being here to take some time to talk to us amidst this important operation to recover the Orion crew module.
Absolutely. I am happy to be here.
So tell me a little bit about the reason you're here and what you're doing as you observe the operations today.
Yeah, of course, we do not have crew on this capsule, but I am here because the next Artemis flight will have crew on it. And so we are starting the process of assessing how we're going to operate with crew. How do we extract the crew from the capsule? How do we get them to the ship safely? How do we do all the medical checks we want to do? So we're starting the process of getting ready for the next Artemis mission.
And with this capsule being recovered today, it will be brought back. I imagine that the astronauts will be very interested in the data that comes off of it. This particular capsule has sensors all over it, more than any future capsule will have.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is going to tell us what we need to do, change, modify for the next Artemis mission.
On all flight quarter stations. The ship expects to read manned flight quarters at 0945.
And what you're hearing are some announcements from the ship PA informing the crew at what stage in the operation we're at. I should mention that we just had helicopters, the MH-60s at the back of the flight deck just launched off and are in flight now to the recovery area. They play an important role here. Shannon, continuing now with our interview, when you look at the operation as a whole, they're currently trying to determine how the astronauts will be recovered. That's not happening today.
That's right.
But that will have to be integrated into the operation. Do they come off immediately after the crew splashes down? Or there's an idea kicking around there to have them stay in the capsule and come to the back of the ship. What are your thoughts on both of those? What are the pluses and minuses on those?
Well, certainly the plus of having the crew come off immediately is that the crew is not staying in the capsule for an extended period of time. There'll be a time when we'll have to turn off the cooling in the capsule, which would mean the crew will start getting very warm in their suits. So it's better to get them off before that. Also, you'll probably see later the operations in the well deck. There are a lot of waves in there, and it's probably not going to be a fun ride for the crew to be in there. So you're right, we're looking at it. The actual, next summer, we're going to have another test run. We'll be out on a ship, and we will be looking at all the different methodologies for getting crew off the capsule.
And may I ask what your particular favorite would be? I mean, I think you've already kind of indicated you're leaning more towards let's get off the ship.
Get off immediately. Yeah, so I think we will probably, now don't quote me on this, but we'll probably extract the crew via helicopter from the capsule and helicopter them over to the ship.
And as an astronaut, just briefly, when you come back from space, physically, you're in a condition where, how would you describe it, physically and mentally?
Yeah, so when we come back, we consider a crew deconditioned. While on the space station, for example, we have lots of exercise, so we're really strong when we come back. It is still a big adjustment to being in Earth's gravity again. The lunar missions is kind of in the middle between what we did in the shuttle days and what we're doing on the space station. So we don't know exactly how the crew's going to feel, but they're going to be exhausted, and so their balance may be off a little bit. So it's better just to get them out of the capsule. As far as the mental side goes, I found that when I am back on Earth, it's just a huge sigh of relief in that somebody else is worrying all the details and I can just sit and relax a little bit.
Well, we appreciate you being here. Thank you for all the insight. You're doing a great job of staying balanced amidst the 4 to 5 foot seas as you see the horizon going up and down, right?
It is definitely a challenge.
Thank you very much, Shannon. Rob, we'll send it back to you in Houston.
Thanks, Daryl. Thank you, Shannon, and happy sailing out there as we continue to watch this scintillating view of the Earth, as we are just 1 hour, 5 minutes away from splashdown. Now, as Shannon Walker alluded to in that interview with Daryl Nail on the USS Portland, we're going to be on the air here for a couple of hours after splashdown, while a number of flight objectives and test objectives are being conducted, data gathering on the Orion spacecraft. But the whole recovery issue to get Orion into the well deck of the USS Portland is no small feat. Melissa Jones, who is the landing director and the recovery director from the Kennedy Space Center, has worked tirelessly to choreograph all of the elements of that recovery operation. Let's take a look now at how Orion will be recovered.
Today we are aboard the USS John P. Murtha, and behind me is a mock-up capsule of the Orion crew module, and we are training the team to be ready to do Artemis 1 recovery operations. My role as the NASA Recovery Director is to lead the interagency team that will recover the capsule. Ever since the Apollo program, NASA and the Navy have worked together to recover NASA's capsules in the water. So one of the huge benefits of working with the Navy is the fact that they're operational and we leverage their core competencies to bring the flight hardware and the crew back safely from the moon. On the Artemis 1 recovery day, my job will be to direct the team through the integrated operation to recover the capsule. The ship will get to the recovery location 24 hours before, and we will start launching weather balloons. And that data will go back to Houston and will help inform where we splash down. A couple hours before splashdown, the Navy launches small boats off of the knuckle boom crane, and helicopters will take off and they will do their circles in the air, and they are waiting for the capsule to re-enter so that they can get good data and photo imagery of the capsule on its way back to Earth. Once that is done and we splash down, we will safe the capsule, approach the capsule, attach lines to the capsule, and recover it into the well deck of the ship. Artemis 1 recovery operations will take about 5 hours to perform all of the work we need to do because we are gathering data so that we can fly crewed mission on Artemis 2. When Artemis 1 splashes down, it's going to be the culmination of all of the hard work that we've put in as a team. It's going to be an amazing feeling, hearing that we've met Earth's interface and that we can see 3 good main parachutes. And when we hear splashdown, I'm going to get goosebumps all over me.
And again, that whole recovery operation will take several hours. We are going to remain on the air for at least 2 hours or so after splashdown, so that we can bring you all the information regarding the initial safing of the vehicle and the test objectives that the flight control team here in Houston, led by Flight Director Judd Freeling, will be absorbing all of that data, mostly about the thermal conditions of the spacecraft, which will have come through some 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit in entry. And with us at this moment is the man who is going to be watching all of that very, very carefully, John Kowal, who's the Orion Thermal Protection System Manager. John, your big moment is lying ahead here. The the plunge back into the Earth's atmosphere. This is the moment of truth to test the heat shield. What kind of thermal environment are you expecting for Orion as it makes its way into the Earth's atmosphere and then back through the atmosphere itself?
Yeah, so, as you mentioned, 5,000 degrees on the ship, but to back that up, how do we get there? So that vehicle still has all that energy that the launch rocket put into it during that first beautiful launch, right? So that gets converted into velocity. So we're going at 25,000 miles per hour, which is, how do you even fathom what that means? It's 7 miles per second. Wow. So all that energy, enough to power 4,000, 5,000 homes in a day, we have to get rid of it. And how do we do that? The vehicle comes slamming in to the atmosphere, starts trying to push the air up out of the way. That air is pushing back. The pressures go up. The temperatures go up. We're talking upwards of around 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit in the flow field. So that energy goes into the flow field, and then the flow field wants to give it back to the surface of the TPS. So that's what the TPS is going to see, or what the heat shield is going to see, and that's what pushes it up to 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
What kind of testing was required throughout the course of the preparations for Orion to prepare the vehicle for launch that made you confident that it could withstand the rigors of this sort of environment?
Yeah, there's been a lot of testing. I mean, we've been at this for since the end of the shuttle program. If you think back to that system, that was a reusable system, we had kind of been out of the business of these ablation materials for quite a while, since Apollo. So we had to train a whole new generation of engineers on developing that type of system, as well as getting the materials back. So there was a lot of testing in arc jets. That's the primary way that you test these types of materials. You can create these temperatures. It's like a wind tunnel with a lightning bolt going down the center of it, and that's how you create this high temperature plasma, and that gets impinged onto the test article. So we do a lot of materials testing. We've done quite a bit of testing of the system. Even though we're using the same material, the AVCoat that they used in Apollo, it's in a different form. And so we made it into blocks. Those blocks have seams that have to be filled. Those seams are always one of the areas that you want to test the most, is because that's where the problems happen. And so we've done a lot of testing there in the thermal. And also structurally, we've had to do a lot of testing to see how the AVCoat blocks interact with the structure underneath, and make sure that it's all going to hold up to those loads.
And John, it's about 11 minutes or so from the time of entry interface at an altitude of about 400,000 feet until we come out of that second blackout period. So that's going to be a very interesting time, sort of a nail-biting time, if you will. But after the vehicle splashes down and is back at the Kennedy Space Center in a few weeks for post-flight analysis, what are the sorts of things that you and your engineering team will be looking for to give it a passing grade in preparation for putting a crew on board a couple of years from now?
Yeah, there's a couple things that we look at. I break it into two different categories. The first is the flight data. We have instrumentation embedded in the heat shield at a number of locations. So we measure temperatures, we measure heat rates, we measure pressures, stresses. All that data will tell us how the material actually performed in that flight environment. It will also help us to inform our computer modeling methods, and that's another thing that we need to make sure that it's performing how we thought it was going to perform, so that we can use those models in the future, to predict for other missions. Now, the other thing we'll do is we'll be looking at the hardware itself. The instrumentation, you only get measurements where you put that instrument, of course, right? But looking at the heat shield, just looking at it, the big picture, you can see the streamlines, you can see how the flow was going across the heat shield, you can see where boundary layer transition may have occurred. So there's so much to just visually see, and then we'll be taking samples of the heat shield, we'll be taking that material out and looking at how much had ablated, looking at the char thickness, the density gradients as you go through as the material burned off, and comparing that to what our models have predicted. And again, that'll help us to be able to validate and correlate our models further.
Very good. It's going to be a very important time for the engineers, of course, and we'll see how Orion fares here in the next hour or so. John Kowal, Orion's Thermal Protection System Manager, thanks very much for joining us this morning.
Sure. Thank you.
Now just 16.5 minutes away from the separation of the crew module from the European service module that will begin a trip hammer series of events as Orion begins the process of entering the Earth's atmosphere. Entry interface just 36 minutes away. So let's go back out to the Pacific Ocean west of Baja, where Daryl is on the USS Portland. Daryl?
That's right, Rob. A quick update for you on out here in the Pacific Ocean, just off the coast of Mexico. We have the small boats, the Navy small boats. All 6 boats are now in the water. They call them cricks. These are Navy boats that are inflatable, highly maneuverable. These are the ones that will actually put hands on the spacecraft in order to secure it and eventually get it tied to lines that brings it to the back of the ship and into the well deck. I want to talk a little bit about this location here today. This location in the Pacific, we're just about 5 miles away from the splashdown area. This was actually the backup location. Initially, this was supposed to happen off the coast of San Diego, California, but the weather forecast for that area called for a cold front that has moved in today, bringing with it 12-foot high seas, and those seas would have been too high to perform this operation, too high for the small boats for recovery. So Recovery Director Melissa Jones and the mission management team made the decision to back up and go to the backup location 300 miles south of San Diego, and that's where we find ourselves today with excellent weather in order to do this operation. As you look off into the sky, we're awaiting the second to last weather balloon release that we will have for the day. This weather data critical to the operation that is happening today, especially when it comes to the landing point of the crew module in the ocean, as well as the debris that goes with it. And that debris happens during the separation of the forward bay cover, which covers the parachutes, and then of course the parachutes and their hardware themselves. All of it together, they take in the winds, and you can feel the winds are picking up a little bit. That wind data will give us refined information and data in order to calculate exactly the landing spot. Now, we're not alone out here in the Pacific Ocean. We do have friends helping us today, and I want to take a shot now of a ship off in the distance that has joined us for today's operation, and that is the USS Montgomery. That ship is just a few miles away, as you can see it there. The USS Montgomery is providing security today. It is what the Navy calls a littoral ship. It specializes in close-to-shore combat. It's highly maneuverable in that space. Today, though, it has a peaceful mission, and that is to provide security to this location during splashdown. So for the public safety, to prevent boats from coming in and around the area, as well as provide additional eyes to the sky in tracking Orion crew module as it comes down. You can see a little bit of a bounce there, and that's caused by the seas that we are currently experiencing, which are in the range of 4 to 5 feet. Those seas closely tracked by our NASA team with the wave management system. They are wave monitoring system rather. They are closely monitoring the seas for the moment where we bring the Orion capsule into the well deck. That is a highly choreographed and very dynamic operation. With the seas being what they are, when those waves come into the well deck, it can create a very dynamic environment with waves splashing back and forth inside the well deck, and teams on ropes trying to stabilize Orion to get it in just the right position here on the ship to then allow the well deck to drain out, have the Orion crew module put in place for its ride back to San Diego. That's the latest from here on the USS Portland out in the Pacific Ocean. Rob will send it back to you.
Thank you very much, Daryl. We can report that all of Orion's systems are performing magnificently at this hour. At an altitude of just under 6,000 nautical miles, we did lock up on the tracking and data relay satellite system. So Orion's telemetry is now being processed through the TDRS network. This worked in concert with the Deep Space Network throughout the course of the mission. And now that we're on TDRS the rest of the way, we'll be able to have real-time data through our tracking and data relay satellite system constellation. We're just 11.5 minutes away from crew module, service module separation, the first major milestone on the road home in this final phase of Orion's 25.5-day mission. So let's take a visual and interactive look at what is coming up for Orion's journey back to Earth. Let's go back to NASA's Philip Hargrove at the moon board.
Thank you. Welcome back to the moon board. So we're going to talk a bit about the European Service Module and the Orion Crew Module. So as we know, these two systems have been working in tandem for a really long time, and that extends beyond just this Artemis 1 test flight for the past 26 days. So back in 2019 was when they were first integrated and pieced together. In 2020 was when they were fully assembled, including the solar panels and the protective fairings that protected them during launch. And then they were finally attached to the launch abort system and made it on top of SLS in October of 2021, prior to, of course, launch on November 16th, just 26 days ago. So we know that one of the primary test objectives of this mission is to make sure that this heat shield at the bottom of the crew module is able to safely bring our astronauts home from deep space. Now, for reference, when we bring astronauts home from the International Space Station, they're coming in at about 17,000 miles per hour. But today, Orion is coming in at 25,000 miles per hour. So we're coming in way hotter, way faster than we have done before. So we need some new heat shield technology. And we also need some additional hardware in order to slow us down and make that really happen. So let's talk about what that looks like. So this forward segment of the Orion Crew Module is called the forward bay cover. And this section is actually designed to completely be pulled off by 3 parachutes. So we have 3 parachutes that's going to pull that off. We have 2 drogue parachutes that are going to come out after that to slow us down a bit. We have 3 pilot parachutes that are going to pull our mains out. And then the stars of the show are 3 main parachutes that measure up to 116 feet in diameter each. So that gives us 11 parachutes that it takes to get us safely back home. So now that we know a little bit about what that hardware looks like, we can take a look at what that journey actually looked like. So as we know, we had a 7-day return transit. And as we approached the Earth, the service module and the crew module separated from one another. And the service module is going to burn up in the atmosphere above the Pacific Ocean. As that happens, the Orion Crew Module is going to use its reaction control thrusters to do a 180 flip and point that heat shield towards the atmosphere as we target re-entry. So a really important phase here is entry interface. This is at an altitude of about 400,000 feet, and this is where we define a lot of our entry conditions, such as the flight path angle and the velocity. Now this is really important because if you come in at too shallow of an angle, you may bounce right off the atmosphere and not even re-enter. But if you come in too steeply, you're going to experience forces that are beyond the design of your spacecraft. So what we're going to do today is actually toe the line and do a nominal skip maneuver where we're actually going to bounce off once. That allows us to have a steeper re-entry, and that actually increases the heating, allowing us to really test the capability of that heat shield. And we will also be minimizing the G loading, which leads to a softer ride for the Moonican and in the future for our Artemis astronauts. Now, once we do that, the atmosphere is going to slow us down pretty significantly, but we'll still be going over 300 miles per hour. And then we will slow down to 20 miles per hour after that sequence of 11 parachute deployments. Now, once we splash down west of California, we will have these red inflatables that will make sure that no matter what orientation we hit the water at, we will be right side up. And then the USS Portland is going to recover the capsule and bring it back to the US Naval Station in San Diego. Now, there's a really large team comprised of US Navy, Air Force, NASA, contractors who worked really hard to prepare for today. So I am super excited to see them welcome Orion home. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Philip. We are coming up on the critical stuff leading up to Orion's return to Earth and its splashdown in the Pacific, just 7 minutes away now from crew module, service module separation. That European service module has worked like a champ throughout the course of the mission. The service module, which of course housed the solar arrays and all of the other propulsive functioning for Orion throughout the course of the mission, has been monitored in the European service module control room in Noordwijk in the Netherlands, where that team of flight controllers is eagerly awaiting the completion of the service module's work just a few minutes from now, when it will pyrotechnically separate from the crew module, leaving the crew module on its own. Entry interface is scheduled just 26 minutes from now. We'll be receiving reports from Flight Director Judd Freeling and his team of flight controllers throughout Orion's descent back into the Earth's atmosphere, and through all of the parachute deployment sequence events leading up to splashdown that is scheduled at 11:39 and 42 seconds a.m. Central Time, 9:39 and 42 seconds a.m. Pacific Time. One thing worth noting is once Orion splashes down in the Pacific, it will stabilize in one of two positions, either pointed up, which is called Stable 1, or pointed down in Stable 2. The crew module uprighting system, known as the CMUS, deploys a series of 5 bright orange helium-filled bags on the top of the capsule that will either flip Orion right side up or keep it right side up in its Stable 1 position. Those 5 bags are packed in hard containers and installed atop the capsule inside the structural gussets between the parachutes and other equipment. They're inflated with helium gas that is stored in pressure vessels located close by the bags. Each bag has its own independent inflation system. The CMUS, or crew module uprighting system, initiates after landing and opens up a valve for helium to flow into those uprighting bags. It is considered, at least operational, that we have 4 out of those 5 bags to inflate to maintain a Stable 1 configuration for Orion, to enable Navy divers to approach the vehicle. One of the first things that they'll be looking for is any leakage of toxic gas or toxic fuel from the vehicle. Assuming there is no such leak and that Orion appears to be in good shape, then they'll begin the methodical process of approaching the vehicle with other personnel and other Navy assets in order to begin the securing of Orion on the ocean for its towing back into the well deck of the USS Portland. We're under 4 minutes now until the crew module and service module separate from one another. We'll be standing by for all of that. You can see in this telemetry-driven animation that Orion is currently traveling just under 17,000 miles an hour, just under 4,000 miles away from Earth, and a hefty 254,000 miles from the moon, which of course was its target, in distant retrograde orbit, flying around the moon for its outbound powered flyby at the beginning of the mission to move to a distance of some 268,000 miles away from Earth, farther than any human-rated spacecraft designed to return to Earth had ever been designed to do, surpassing the distance record established 52 years ago during the Apollo 13 mission. Here in Mission Control, the flight dynamics folks and the guidance, navigation, and control folks have put up a graphic which is essentially the ground track for Orion as it will make its way across the southern Indian Ocean, passing the northwest coast of Australia en route to its ultimate trajectory that will carry it across the Pacific. It will be moving from south to north across the Pacific Ocean to the splashdown zone, almost a direct straight line towards the point of splashdown, which will be west of Baja California. Now just under 2 minutes until crew module, service module separation. Now just 1 minute away from crew module, service module separation. We'll be standing by for confirmation of that from the mechanical systems officer here at Mission Control. "30 seconds until separation. This will come at an altitude of 3,200 statute miles. "10 seconds until SEP. We have confirmation of separation. Orion flying on its own. Again, the separation occurred right on time at 11 a.m. and 11 seconds Central Time, with Orion 3,200 statute miles away from Earth. The service module, the European service module, has done its job. So with Orion flying on its own, we're about 18.5 minutes away now from the point of entry interface, where Orion will be put through its paces. This is where the heat shield will begin to feel the effects of peak heating of 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit on the heat shield, and the beginning of 2 blackout periods where the plasma around the vehicle will build up such that it will block data and communications between mission control and the spacecraft itself. Orion continues to fly smoothly on, all of its systems in excellent shape. Less than 17 minutes until entry interface. And the crew module raise burn that we thought was not going to be needed is being conducted. Just basically a fine-tuning of the orientation and the angle, a 16-second firing of the thrusters, and a good burn reported, 8.12 feet per second in a change in velocity. So the raise burn was executed. That will further fine-tune Orion's path at the proper azimuth or orientation where the heat shield is at its optimum angle to begin the repulsion of the heat that will build up around the heat shield at the time that we begin entry interface just about 15.5 minutes from now. So the crew module service module separation went off as planned. The raise maneuver was executed at 11:03 and 41 seconds Central Time. Again, the raise maneuver was executed. Orion now flying at the proper orientation for entry interface into the Earth's atmosphere. Entry interface is scheduled at 11:20 and 14 seconds a.m. Central Time at an altitude of 400,000 feet. At that point, Orion will be traveling 24,464 miles an hour with a range to splashdown of 3,659 statute miles. Flight controllers reporting a solid lock with the tracking and data relay satellite system, receiving data that's being processed through the TDRS network. Just a reminder that after we pass into the Earth's atmosphere, at the speed at which we're going and with the temperatures expected to build up very quickly for peak heating around the heat shield of Orion, we will begin the first of two blackout periods, the first of which is scheduled to begin at 11:20 and 16 seconds a.m. Central Time and will last about 4 minutes and 48 seconds. At that time, entry guidance, which has been stored on board, pre-programmed commanding for Orion to continue to point its way toward the splashdown zone, will take over. The first blackout period should end around 11:25 and 4 seconds Central Time. That will set the stage for the skip entry, basically the maneuver that will enable Orion to dip into the Earth's atmosphere and skip back out of the Earth's atmosphere and dip back into the Earth's atmosphere like a rock, a flat rock on a pond. That will continue to dissipate energy and heat on the spacecraft, and is a maneuver that data will be gathered for to try to bring in multiple splashdown sites for crewed missions in the future. The second of the two blackout periods is scheduled to begin at 11:29 and 3 seconds a.m. Central Time, and that will last for about 2 minutes and 50 seconds till about 11:31 and change. That'll be the final blackout period, after which we should lock up solidly for the remaining 8 minutes or so until splashdown. This is Mission Control Houston, 12 minutes away from entry interface. Everything is going by the book so far here in Mission Control, very quiet on the loops. Entry Flight Director Judd Freeling and his team of flight controllers watching carefully over their data as they oversee the arrival of Orion for its splashdown site west of Baja, California. Time to splash down 31 minutes. Less than 11 minutes now until entry interface. During the period of the two blackouts, and even after we have emerged from the second of the two blackouts, Orion, through a series of pre-programmed commands stored on board, will conduct a series of role reversals. This is very much like space shuttles conducted during their entries back to Earth, where it will roll to the left and then back to the right, banking roll reversals that will bleed off excess energy, excess inertia, and speed, and control the thermal characteristics of the vehicle as it heads towards its subsonic point, where it will go under Mach 1. It will go subsonic at about 11:34 and 55 seconds a.m. Central Time, some 5 minutes before splashdown. If everything goes as planned, Orion will reach an altitude of 40,000 feet at 11:35 a.m. Central Time, just about a minute before forward bay cover chute deploy begins. The series of 11 chutes, 3 that will pull the forward bay cover off of the top of the crew module. That'll be followed by the deployment of the drogue chutes, and then the 3 large main parachutes, 3 orange and white parachutes. That'll be the moment we'll be waiting for. Orion now 28.5 minutes until splashdown. Orion is approaching the northwest coast of Australia. 27.5 minutes until splashdown. We're just 8 minutes away from the point at which Orion will dip into the Earth's atmosphere and begin what basically is a hellish entry, where temperatures around the spacecraft will raise to about 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That's half as hot as the outer surface of the sun. And correction, Orion is actually traveling over the South Pacific at the moment, moving from south to north. Just 7.5 minutes until entry interface. And this view from a camera inside the cabin of Orion, this doesn't look like much at the moment, but it will soon when it shows the forward bay cover jettisoning and the initiation of the parachute deployment system. Entry interface less than 6.5 minutes from now. Just to recap, the crew module, the Orion crew module, separated from the European service module about 14.5 minutes ago, right on target as it was planned, and a short raise maneuver, a 16-second firing of Orion's thrusters, oriented the vehicle, raising it just a tad so that its heat shield was at the proper orientation in the direction of travel, to begin entry interface in about 5 minutes at an altitude of 400,000 feet above the Earth. Orion is making its way south to north across the Pacific Ocean. Currently traveling at 23,000 miles an hour. We're about 5 minutes away from entering the first of the 2 blackout periods, which will last about 4 minutes and 48 seconds. A journey that began with the power of the launch of the Space Launch System 25.5 days ago, about to reach its final minutes in the searing heat of re-entry, where temperatures around Orion will build up to 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Just under 4 minutes until entry interface. Once again, at entry interface, which we will reach about 3 minutes from now, Orion will be at an altitude of 400,000 feet, traveling just under 25,000 miles an hour, with a range to splashdown of 3,659 statute miles. Within seconds after reaching entry interface, we'll begin the first of the 2 blackout periods that will last just under 5 minutes, about 4 minutes and 48 seconds. And here's the ground track for Orion as it passes well to the west of South America, We're just 1 minute, 44 seconds away from entry interface, moving from south to north to its splashdown target west of Baja, California. Just 1 minute away from entry interface. And this view from the cabin camera, looking out of the upper hatch of Orion, you can see the limb of the Earth. We're going to be losing all of the data here shortly once we enter into the Earth's atmosphere and begin the first of the 2 blackout periods. Standing by for entry interface and the first of the 2 blackout periods. We are now in the entry phase. Entry interface has begun. Entry interface at 400,000 feet. Orion traveling just under 25,000 miles an hour. We've gone into the first blackout period. This is a visualization based on what should be happening at the moment, where the temperatures around the heat shield are reaching about 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. This is the moment of truth for Orion. We should be coming out of this first blackout period just under 4 minutes from now. Orion should be traveling about 23,326 miles an hour at the moment. Range to splashdown, 3,125 statute miles. Again, this is a visualization of what should be happening with Orion at the moment, although we are in a blackout period that should end about 3 minutes and 15 seconds from now. Once we emerge from this first blackout period, we'll conduct the skip entry maneuver that will further dissipate heat and energy and begin a very, very dramatic reduction in the velocity of Orion as it approaches its splashdown site. Clocks here in Mission Control showing the sequence of events yet to come. The first blackout period to end about 2 minutes and 18 seconds from now. The second of the 2 blackout periods would begin about 6 minutes from now for about 7 minutes, followed by the jettisoning of the forward bay cover. That will begin the sequence of the deployment of the parachutes. First, a pair of drogue chutes, 3 pilot parachutes that will then pull 3 main parachutes to begin the final moments of Orion's descent back to its splashdown in the Pacific Ocean. 1 minute to go until we come out of this first blackout period. When we emerge from this first blackout period, we'll be at an altitude of 274,000 feet, traveling just under 17,000 miles an hour with a range to splashdown of 2,000 statute miles. Standing by for a reacquisition of signal. And we have data from Orion. Orion out of the blackout period. Flight Dynamics reports that Orion is right on the money, coming right down the pike. A good view out of the cabin camera looking out of the upper hatch of Orion. We should be performing the skip entry maneuver momentarily. Good communications established with Orion. The second blackout period to begin about 2 minutes from now. Orion is at the apogee of the skip entry maneuver, beginning the second in a series of role reversals, again banking maneuvers to bleed off excess inertia and to dissipate heat around the spacecraft. The start of the second blackout period, about 1 minute and 13 seconds from now, will come at an altitude of 270,000 feet, with Orion traveling about 16,400 miles an hour, range to splashdown less than 1,000 miles. Coming up on the start of the second blackout period. We should be in that second blackout period right now. Orion approaching a velocity of 20 times the speed of sound. If all goes as planned, we should be out of the blackout period with a solid lockup on the vehicle at 11:31 and 46 seconds a.m. Central Time. This is Mission Control Houston, the airborne WB-57, one of the airborne assets to track Orion's return to Earth, has visual acquisition of the vehicle. We should be coming out of this second and final blackout about 30 seconds from now. And helos flying off the deck of the USS Portland now have a visual acquisition of Orion as well. At an altitude of 174,000 feet, traveling 12,600 miles an hour, range to splashdown 288 statute miles. This view on the deck of the USS Portland. And there is a view out of the cabin camera of Orion as it continues a series of role reversals. We have data back from the spacecraft. Flight Dynamics reports Orion straight and narrow on a true course toward its splashdown site. Forward bay covered jettisoning less than 3.5 minutes from now. (150,000 feet off the ocean). Orion now traveling at Mach 10. Orion's speed now down to Mach 6. Two minutes until forward bay covered jettisoning. Orion 100,000 feet now. The spacecraft about to go subsonic. "45 seconds until forward bay cover jettisoning. Orion now at 50,000 feet. Forward bay cover jettisoning pyros are armed. "25,000 feet. Drogues have been deployed. Two good drogue shoots reported by the recovery team out in the Pacific. The descent rate is right on the money. Orion's velocity now down to 282 miles an hour. Range to splashdown 1.5 miles. 10,000 feet now. And we're on mains. 5,000 feet. Reefing in progress. Three good main shoots for Orion. We have three fully inflated main chutes. Time to splashdown 90 seconds. Perfect descent rate reported. And there it is, high over the Pacific, America's new ticket to ride to the moon and beyond now in view. Orion under its chutes descending towards splashdown. Orion in the perfect orientation for splashdown, just seconds away. 1,000 feet. Good descent rate. .500 feet. Splashdown. From Tranquility Base to Taurus Littrow to the tranquil waters of the Pacific, the latest chapter of NASA's journey to the moon comes to a close. Orion, back on Earth. Unofficial splashdown time, 11:40 and 30 seconds a.m. Central Time. At a mission elapsed time of 25 days, 10 hours, 54 minutes, 50 seconds. That's unofficial. Splashing down off the coast of Baja California. The crew module uprighting system now being inflated for the bags currently being inflated. And we have a report that Orion is stable 1, upright, the way it should be. Once again, splashdown occurring at 11:40 a.m. Central Time, 9:40 a.m. Pacific Time, west of Baja California, after a textbook entry for the Orion spacecraft, bringing its 25.5-day mission to an end. Orion's recovery beacon is on. We have confirmation that 4 out of the 5 crew module uprighting system bags have fully inflated, standing by for word on the 5th one. But Orion is in great shape, stable 1, just in the orientation that had been expected. This is Mission Control Houston. Once again, the Orion spacecraft, having completed a journey of 1.4 million miles, bobbing gently in the Pacific Ocean. 4 out of its 5 crew module uprighting system bags have been deployed. We're standing by for word on the 5th. However, irrespective of that, it is in stable 1 configuration, in good shape, according to the recovery team. And we are now receiving word that all 5 of the crew module uprighting system bags are fully inflated. So that's exactly what we had hoped for. Orion safely bobbing up and down in the Pacific Ocean. This is Mission Control Houston. You're looking at the Orion spacecraft that splashed down about 6.5 minutes ago at 11:40 a.m. Central Time, 9:40 a.m. Pacific Time. We are estimating that it splashed down around 5 nautical miles away from the USS Portland. The recovery ship and Navy boats and divers will be approaching the vehicle before long. The spacecraft is in what is called a stable 1 configuration, upright, just the way we had expected it to be. 5 perfectly inflated crew module uprighting system bags, maintaining a nice gentle configuration for Orion. First of the Navy helicopters now approaching the vehicle. And here in Mission Control, some of Orion's systems no longer needed are being powered down. Many of them will stay powered up for the next 2 hours while we conduct a series of test objectives to characterize the thermal conditioning of the spacecraft. That will be important for future data for crewed missions to determine how long the crews can remain comfortable inside a vehicle returning from the moon. We also will be conducting tests of the beacon and SARSAT system for maintaining tracking of the spacecraft, for recovery forces that will be approaching the spacecraft in the future. And coming up in the next hour and a half will be the reactivation of an ammonia boiler system that will provide cooling in the spacecraft, as it will when crews return from their missions on board Orion. This is Mission Control Houston. Reports from the USS Portland indicate that the first of two Navy helicopters flying in the vicinity of Orion, which is about 5 nautical miles away from the ship, indicate no damage to the spacecraft and no hazardous fuel leaking from the spacecraft. A good view of the helicopters and the initial Navy boats that will be approaching Orion a short time from now. Once again, the splashdown occurring at 11:40 a.m. Central Time, 9:40 a.m. Pacific Time. This is Mission Control Houston. Orion in the Pacific Ocean, having splashed down at 11:40 a.m. Central Time, 9:40 a.m. Pacific Time, around 5 nautical miles or so from the USS Portland, a textbook entry for the vehicle. On the USS Portland at this hour, my colleague Daryl Nell from the Kennedy Space Center, who's with the Exploration Ground Systems Recovery Team. Daryl, how did it look to you? It certainly looked textbook to us here.
I'd say that's a great description, Rob. Perfectly landed here in the Pacific Ocean, and that's been confirmed by the operations manager that I just spoke to. Watching it from the deck as an observer, we have, as you can see, some broken clouds in the sky, like right around 3,000 feet. But we saw those 3 full main parachutes pop out. It was a beautiful sight, probably just about several thousand feet in the sky, and then we watched that slow descent as the Orion crew module made its way down to the Pacific Ocean. Saw the splash, and then of course the assets aboard the USS Portland here immediately started making their way towards the splashdown site, and as you see live now, they are close to being next to the capsule. Now the helicopters that you see flying there, those are MH-60s. We have 2 of them in the air, and they are right now gathering high quality, high definition imagery of the capsule in the water. There's a spotter aboard. We have photographers as well. The doors are completely open on both sides of the helicopters, and so you can see them flying at a circular track around the splashdown location. They have marked, if you can see it, you can see what looks like smoke coming off a location just to the left there. That is the boats having marked location where some of the debris has come down, the debris that was part of the separation event, part of the parachutes opening event. So you have the sabot as well as the lid from the parachutes. All of that is being tracked by the Sasquatch team, and the Navy boats are marking that with floatable smoke grenades. All of that hardware the team wants to recover because there's valuable information and data in it. The helicopters will be out for another 20 minutes gathering imagery. You can see one of them getting very close to the crew module. There is an GSS camera, ultra high definition, 8K, which is gathering imagery. We are currently on course to go right by the splashdown location, so we are right about 3.5 miles and closing. We are going to a point that's going to be 1 mile out. That's our next waypoint, 1 mile out from the splashdown location. One of the things we're waiting for is for ammonia boil off, and that's why the Navy boats are not yet next to the capsule. We're still going to wait that out. The amount of time that that's going to take is has not been determined. They have allowed for as much as 2 hours. The ammonia on the capsule is used for cooling purposes, to keep the cabin cool for crew. Of course, there's no crew in this capsule, but for future missions, it will certainly be an important part of keeping the astronauts cool during the heat of re-entry. But for now, they're going to vent off that ammonia, and as they do that, it's not quite safe to get close to the capsule with the Navy divers. So of course we'll keep our eyes fixed to the location, our cameras as well. The USS Portland's standing by for our next waypoint, 1 mile from the splashdown site. And then once the completion of the ammonia boil-off, the Navy boats will be going in. A spectacular sight from out here, Rob. Toss it back to you.
Thanks, Daryl. Back here in Mission Control, the entry Flight Director Judd Freeling on the left. To his left, Flight Director Rick Henfling. And with me on console here, probably none more important than the NASA Administrator, Bill Nelson. Senator, thank you for joining us today.
Rob, I'm overwhelmed. I'd say it's good to see you, but this is an extraordinary day.
I remember years ago when I saw you return on Columbia from your mission into space, and it all conjures up a tremendous amount of memories. Orion back on Earth, having circumnavigated the moon, having survived a critical test of its heat shield, I think you have to be hesitant to celebrate and throw confetti a little bit too early, but it certainly is an important achievement, is it not?
It's historic because we are now going back into space, into deep space, with a new generation. Kennedy just stunned everybody with the Apollo generation and said that we were going to achieve what we thought was impossible. And did that in a short period of time. And many things have happened since. But we knew we were going back. But we knew we were going back to the moon just to continue to explore outward into the cosmos. And so that's why this is a defining day. It is one that marks new technology, a whole new breed of astronaut, a vision for the future that captures the DNA of particularly Americans, although we do this as an international venture. And that DNA is we are adventurers, we are explorers. We always have a frontier, and that frontier is now to continue exploring the heavens.
We had to wait a while for Artemis to finally get to the point where the Space Launch System got us underway back on November 16th, but once it did, these engineers and the other members of the teams, front room, back room, they've been pretty giddy over the amount of data that they've required and how this vehicle appears to have exceeded its expectations in its performance.
The whole vehicle, the rocket, the European participation in the support module, the spacecraft itself, Orion, performing so well that they added a lot of tests. And lo and behold, we're going to be up to our ears in data, thankfully. And of course, today the two main things that had to happen was that that heat shield had to work, and it did beautifully, where they can skip off the atmosphere and bleed that speed down from 25,000 miles an hour. And then the parachutes had to work, and they did it as well.
You know, the engineering, the design of this mission, all the work that will go into the next flight when a crew is on board, right, to orbit the moon. What does this say about NASA and the international partner cooperation and the partnership that ultimately takes us not only to the moon but beyond?
Well, it says a lot about our country because we don't do it secretively. We do it openly, and we do it with our friends, and we invite all peoples of the earth. And we are doing it also with commercial partners, because when we go into orbit on Apollo 3, we are going to rendezvous and dock with in this case, SpaceX lander, and the crew will go down to the surface. And then we have another competition going on now for another lander, so that we will have two landers. And again, this is the program of going back to the moon to learn, to live, to invent, to create in order to explore beyond.
50 years ago today, Gene Cernan, Jack Schmitt landed their lunar module Challenger on Taurus Littrow, the final lunar landing. It only seems fitting half a century later to the day, Orion back home.
And what a fitting opportunity that I had last night to sit with Jack Schmitt at the astronaut dinner and to talk to him about those experiences. 50 years, it's a long time, but look what we have done in the meantime. The space shuttle, we built the International Space Station, we brought in commercial partners. We now go to and from regularly the International Space Station with cargo and crew. Here we go. We've got scouts going to the moon that are commercial scouts that land, that take NASA instruments and scientific instruments in preparing us for the landings of our astronauts. And so it's a new day. A new day has dawned. An Artemis generation is taking us there.
And Orion continues to await the arrival of the USS Portland, which shouldn't be very much longer from now, and some flight test objectives that will be taking place over the next couple of hours before we here in Houston hand the vehicle over to the Kennedy Space Center recovery team. NASA Administrator Bill Nelson, pleasure to see you today, and thank you so much for being with us.
What a day. Oh, it is my great privilege.
This is Mission Control Houston, 26 minutes after the return of Orion from its circumnavigation of the moon and a splashdown in the Pacific, a bullseye splashdown, just about 5 nautical miles away from the USS Portland, as had been planned. The Portland about to arrive near the spacecraft, as you heard from Daryl Nail, who at this moment is standing by on the Portland with the woman in charge of the recovery operations, Melissa Jones. Daryl?
Thank you, Rob. That's right. Melissa Jones, the recovery director, just came from outside the ship's control center where she was monitoring and, of course, managing her team in the midst of this recovery. So, Melissa, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. This is an exciting day.
What a day it is, right? We just had splashdown and want to ask you, first of all, operationally, where do we stand and what do we have to go?
So we had a picture-perfect splashdown, and at this time we're gathering data. With the CM powered up, we'll get some flight test objective data on thermal conditioning, and we're doing some signal data with the tri-band beacons, making sure that we can see the beacons on the capsules and on the astronaut suits to prepare for Artemis 2. And once that is complete, the vehicle will be powered down by the Mission Control Center, and they'll hand that over officially to us here locally in the Pacific. And then we will approach the capsule and attach some lines to it and pull it into the back of the well deck.
And that's a delicate mission, right? Because you will be attaching lines, and through the use of Navy boats and then also a winch inside the well deck, and Navy sailors on the lines attached to it as well. It seems like a very delicate operation, especially getting in the well deck where waves will be sloshing around. And we've got already 4 to 5 foot seas out here in the Pacific.
Correct. So it is a delicate balance to try to control the capsule in the well deck with all the water that we have in there, and to softly land it on the cradle so that we can capture as much data from the heat shield as possible.
Now, as the capsule was coming down, just briefly tell me your reaction that moment that it splashed down.
So when they called capture from the helicopters, it was the most amazing feeling. It's just been a long time coming. We've been working this mission for a while, and we've done a ton of training. And every time you do training with a mock-up capsule, you don't have any of that. You don't have parachutes. You don't, hear it coming back to the atmosphere, the sonic booms and all of that kind of stuff. And today that actually happened. It's just amazing.
And your team, it's worth noting, has been out here a long time. From the moment of launch, you were on console, ready to support if something off-nominal happened, unusual. You were going to be able to recover that capsule wherever it was needed to recover. So you were working that and then stayed through Thanksgiving all the way to now, so it's been a long road.
It has been, yeah. Several of us supported launch, and then we deployed out here about 23 days before, and we're out here for Thanksgiving as a team. So we have been waiting for this and preparing for it for a while.
And it looks like you're doing a great job so far. Good luck the rest of the way, Melissa Jones, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
All right, Rob?
Thank you, Daryl. We'll be back to you on the USS Portland here shortly as the post-splashdown activities and the recovery operations will continue. As mentioned earlier, it will take about 2 hours from the time of splashdown until the time that Flight Director Judd Freeling and his team of entry flight controllers here will hand the vehicle over to the Exploration Ground System Recovery Team that will work over the next several hours to bring the Orion into the well deck of the USS Portland. With me, a familiar face, Bob Cabana, NASA's Associate Administrator. Bob, it's great to see you here. And with Orion back on Earth, another milestone accomplished on the road back to putting Americans on the surface of the moon. In terms of the criticality of what we've seen over the past 4 weeks, your thoughts on how this mission evolved and now the stepping stone that would put a crew on board a couple of years from now?
Oh, Rob, it's been absolutely critical to get this mission off safely. This test flight is what we need in order to prove this vehicle so that we can fly with a crew, and that's the next step, and I can't wait. You know, the launch, first off, yeah, I was on the roof of the Launch Control Center. I went up there with the administrator and deputy administrator when we came out of the T-minus 10-minute hold, and it was phenomenal. It was absolutely amazing. The rocket performed flawlessly, and I haven't been that happy in a long time after we came down off the roof. And then to see the mission go as well as it did, the shots that we got from the vehicle, that one from 40,000 miles away where you saw the moon with the Earth in the background. And then this morning, I mean, we've learned how to operate this vehicle. A few minor glitches along the way, but it is performed flawlessly, and we're learning how to work with it, operate it, and that's what this JSC team does. It is so great to be back here in mission control, to be with the ops team. I'm so proud of these guys. Amazing. But if you were watching this morning, I loved the video. I don't know if it was on NASA TV or not, but the moon just kept, I mean, the Earth just kept getting bigger and bigger. It was really hauling as it came in. And the preciseness with which they were able to bring it down and seeing the chutes come out, and it's just, I'm so proud of this team, the Orion team, the entire SLS, Artemis team, the folks here at JSC. It's just been amazing. I wish Gene Cernan were still alive. You know, here we are on the 50th anniversary, and Gene was such a proponent of getting us back to the moon. I wish he were alive to have seen this mission. It would have meant a lot to him.
I don't want to date you, but I think 24 years ago, at this moment in time, you were building a space station, I believe, with your crew on STS-88. We had so many dramatic, jaw-dropping images during the course of this flight. What for you was the most impactful moment?
Oh, I'm not sure I can pick one. Obviously, the launch. The team has worked so hard to get to the point where we successfully launched this rocket. I think the successful burns along the way to actually get that go for the TLI burn and do it and be on our way to the moon again. Absolutely awesome. I think the pictures that we saw, but the splashdown, how can you not? I mean, this was really emotional, going around and congratulating folks for what we did. So it's hard to pick just one. I think what has meant the most to me, more than just watching the mission, more than the mission highlights, is being with the teams at the Kennedy Space Center, at the Marshall Space Flight Center, here at the Johnson Space Center, and just being able to go up and talk to them and thank them for all their hard work that got us to where we are. I think it means a lot to me.
And Bob, final question. The next step, Artemis 2, putting a crew on a vehicle to orbit the moon. It's going to be a complicated mission. It's a long road. It seems like a long time from now, but based on what we've just witnessed, and based on what we believe will be the ultimate data flow out of this mission, doesn't seem that far away, does it?
It is not that far away. It's going to mean a lot when we get the crew assigned. And we see them in training. We get that human face to this. I've seen the flight hardware at KSC. The Orion 2 spacecraft for Artemis 2 is there. It's in build. We got to get Artemis 1 back and transfer some of the black boxes across to make sure that they get checked out and everything works. You know, the rocket's being built. We are on the way. And I think when you put a human face to that, when you actually see that, hey, we're sending humans to the moon again, and we're going to get this one-year cadence eventually where we're doing this on an annual basis, this is our future, and it's different from how we went during Apollo. We're going in a sustainable way. We're paving the way to go onto Mars, not just the moon and Mars, but to establish a presence in our solar system beyond our home planet, to explore, to have those technologies in space, to continue to learn and improve things here on planet Earth.
Bob Cabana, NASA's Associate Administrator. Thanks so much for being with us, Bob.
Rob, it is always a pleasure to share a mic with the voice of NASA. I think a lot of you, buddy, you know that. We've worked together a long time. You keep doing a great job.
Thank you very much, Bob. Bob Cabana, NASA's Associate Administrator, with us here in Mission Control. This is Mission Control Houston. About 37 minutes since Orion splashed down in the Pacific. On the deck of the USS Portland, as he has been throughout the course of the morning, Darrell Nail, my colleague from the Kennedy Space Center. Darrell, how are things going out there? It looks like you're about to approach the vehicle.
Yeah, we're very close to that moment, Rob, here on the USS Portland. We're just about 100 miles off the coast of Baja, Mexico. The operation, as you've heard and been commentating, it is going pretty smoothly at this point. But we are in a pre-planned waiting period as we wait for the ammonia that is inside the capsule. It is used for cooling. This is boiling off at this moment into the atmosphere, and until that's complete, the boats will be on hold. Now, the Navy divers right now at this moment are outside of the 120-yard radius around the capsule. That was part of the plan. They will close within just a few feet to start detecting if there are any hazardous gases coming from the capsule. But that will only happen once our recovery director, Melissa Jones, has given them the go to close in. The ship, meanwhile, the USS Portland, is on its way to close within 2,000 yards of the capsule. As you can see it floating there. The bags fully inflated that are used to upright it. Bright orange in color at the top of the capsule. The ship will then come alongside the capsule, and once the Navy divers have gone in and made sure that the capsule is safe to approach, they will begin taking imagery, photographs, both on the top side of the water, and then also they have Navy divers prepared to go underneath the capsule and take pictures of the heat shield, the all-important component of this capsule, which is the primary objective in terms of the test and this flight test, is to make sure that that heat shield works and works well. So fresh from space, they want to make sure that they have images of it preserved as it is now before the operation begins, where they pull it into the well deck of the USS Portland. That will involve the attachment of ropes, as well as a winch line that then connects to the USS Portland. The well deck of the USS Portland will be flooded to about 6 feet, and those Navy boats will attach their lines and then pull alongside the Navy vessel, connect to a winch line, and then carefully tow it into the well deck. Again, we are currently awaiting the completion of ammonia boil-off from the capsule. They've allowed for up to 2 hours, but it could take a shorter period of time. And once you see those Navy boats closing in, then you'll know that that ammonia boil-off is complete. And of course, we'll let you know when that happens. Live on the deck of the USS Portland, Rob, we'll send it back to you.
Thank you, Daryl. Daryl Nail on the USS Portland out in the Pacific, west of Baja, California. Back here in Mission Control as the flight controllers watch over the initial phase of the recovery operations. We're joined by the director of the Johnson Space Center, Vanessa Weich. Vanessa, great Sunday to have you here with us on console.
Fabulous Sunday. What a great day. You know, it's amazing to me everything that has been accomplished throughout this entire mission. But being here with the team and seeing and witnessing this splashdown together, amazing, wonderful. I really can't describe how I feel.
You know, we were talking just a moment ago, it never ceases to amaze me how these missions are designed. The execution is one thing, but the design of the mission here by the flight control team, and just down the hall, by the way, there are humans orbiting the Earth in the International Space Station, so it's almost like a 2-for-1 here.
It is. I mean, you know, to me this week, and well, for the past 26 days, being able to come into the control center and know that we had teams controlling the International Space Station with our crew members on board, and we've had, as you know, successfully crews living off of this planet for over 22 years, but then in another control center where we're monitoring and making sure that the maneuvers, everything that had to happen on the Orion spacecraft, that was being tracked, followed, and, you know, data, anything that needed to be sent up was just done so perfectly and professionally. This team has trained for years. First, you got to plan the mission, as you know. Then you have to execute the mission. And so the years of planning, the years of getting ready, the preparations really paid off.
You know, after a team wins the World Series like the Astros did, you can celebrate for about 24 hours before you have to worry about spring training that's coming up. There's almost never a moment to breathe. Artemis 2, not too far down the pike.
Yes, absolutely. So for us, you know, this is great. We've accomplished Orion 1, this test flight, being able to test out the heat shields, those parachutes, as you saw, brought the spacecraft down. But now we have to get it ready for our crews to be on board. So all of the systems that we need to integrate for our environmental controls, those are things that will be new as we go forward for Artemis 2. And then it's the outfitting of the cabin. All the things, simple things you think about, if they're going to be going for 10 days. So we got to make sure that we have the food, we have the clothing, all of the things that they're going to need for their next trip. But there's a lot of additional training, there's a lot of additional planning that has to happen in order for us to be ready for Artemis 2.
Thank you so much. Vanessa Weich, the director of the Johnson Space Center. What a busy time this has been.
Oh, but I also, Rob, though, I want to say thank you and congratulations to all of the employees, our entire workforce here at NASA Johnson Space Center. But I also want to thank our European partners. I want to thank our industry partners. It took thousands of people to make this possible. And now the recovery that's being done by the Navy. Just want to say major thank you to the brave individuals that are out, and they're going to be bringing the Orion spacecraft into the Portland, and then she'll be back going to Florida, and my friends in Florida are ready to receive her. We're super excited, and just want to say thank you to everyone that has made this possible.
Thank you so much, Vanessa Weich, Director of the Johnson Space Center. Time to celebrate just a little bit before we catch our breath and press on.
Yes, time to celebrate. Then we got to get ready for Artemis too.
Vanessa Weich, thank you so much. Back here in Mission Control, it has now been 46 minutes since the splashdown of the Orion spacecraft to complete its 25-and-a-half-day mission. Flight controllers here in Houston are reporting that the vehicle looks great in the initial visual inspections being made by the helicopter teams, as you heard Daryl Nail reference just a short time ago. We just heard from Vanessa Weich, the Johnson Space Center director. Now let's turn our attention to the East Coast, to the Kennedy Space Center, where the director of the Kennedy Space Center, Janet Petro, is standing by with us. Janet, good afternoon, and what a moment as your exploration ground systems folks are hard at work out in the Pacific.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rob. It's been a really, really exciting morning, and can't wait for our teams to get to work out there on the West Coast.
You know, we heard a short time ago from Melissa Jones from the deck of the USS Portland. How complicated has been the development of this recovery operation that your team is executing as we speak?
Well, it's pretty complicated, but, you know, our teams make it look easy. I will start out by saying, or giving, I should say, a big shout out to really Vanessa and her flight ops team and the whole Orion team to deliver an amazing mission, bringing us down through splashdown. But now it's over to Melissa and her team, and she's done an incredible amount of work to get to this point. You know, what we do at NASA, it really is all about collaborations, and the collaborations that we've had with the Department of Defense in particular over the past many years, their hard work and their dedication as they went through a great deal of planning, hardware development and processes, and a lot of practicing to get to this point and make it look easy. You know, that capsule sitting out there on the ocean, it looks very similar to the Apollo capsule, but it's actually about 30% larger. And so the complexity of recovering that larger vehicle is a little bit more. But Melissa and her team have been practicing, you know, their latest underway recovery test. They completed, it was the 9th one, and they completed that last November 21st of last year, 2021. So they're ready. Watching these teams precisely perform these recovery operations is amazing, and so I think we're going to have a really great day. I'm going to be traveling to San Diego to watch the ship come in port in a couple days, so I look forward to seeing that capsule on board the well-decked ship.
Janet, there's a lot of work to be done before Artemis 2, but the first milestone here will be getting the vehicle back to your center in Florida for a detailed inspection and detailed analysis. What's the basic timeline for all of that work?
Yeah, so Splashdown today is really the beginning of the journey back to KSC. So as I mentioned, I'll be there in San Diego when the ship comes into port in a couple of days, and then Orion will then be loaded onto a truck and transported back to the Kennedy Space Center, and that's going to take a couple of days because of road-related conditions. You know, the Orion will still have some residual hazardous waste on it, and of course, planning the roadways as it gets trucked back to the Kennedy Space Center takes some careful navigation. So by the end of this month, the end of December, we expect to have Orion coming back onto our center. We think that's going to be a really great Christmas present for us here at the Kennedy Space Center. And it'll go right into our multi-payload processing facility for its post-flight assessment. And that's where the remaining residual hazardous fluids will be removed from it. And then just after the new year, the teams will be opening up the hatch of the Orion, and then once that's complete, I think Rob, you called it the moment of truth. They'll remove that heat shield and begin a really detailed inspection and assessment of how that heat shield performed during its reentry and recovery operation. So we're really looking forward. I know the whole team's really looking forward to see how that assessment comes out. And then after that, it's Orion's journey is not done. It'll be making its way up to the Glenn Research Center, where it will be doing some acoustic and further environmental testing up at that center. So journey isn't over. It's just kind of making its way here on the terrestrial path back. So thanks.
Janet Petro, the director of the Kennedy Space Center, joining us here today. Congratulations, Janet, and thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Rob. It's a great capstone to our 60th diamond anniversary to have Splashdown, successful Splashdown. So take care. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you again, Janet Petro, the director of the Kennedy Space Center, joining us today. Orion safely upright and stable 1 as the Navy and Exploration Ground Systems team continue to approach the vehicle in the first of a multi-hour choreography that will bring the vehicle into the well deck of the USS Portland. On the deck of the USS Portland right now is Darrell Nail, who has NASA astronaut Shannon Walker with him once again, post-splashdown this time. Darrell, how are things going out there?
Rob, we've got a front row seat to this operation. As you can see behind me, Shannon Walker, as you mentioned, NASA astronaut, joining me with this incredible view as we watch that capsule floating in the Pacific Ocean just 100 miles off of Baja, Mexico. We have an MH-60 Nighthawk helicopter encircling it and the Navy boats in the water. First of all, Shannon, how about this view?
It is an amazing view and so exciting to see the Orion capsule back on Earth.
That is a human-rated capsule that went around the moon and returned and is now in the Pacific Ocean. As an astronaut, what kind of thoughts do you have seeing a moment like this?
Well, it's actually really emotional to see something like this, knowing that the next time we're going to have people on that capsule or the second Orion capsule. It's pretty amazing that we're going to be able to go back to the moon soon.
Incredible indeed. And as we look at, let's paint the picture for the audience as we look out at this operation. Currently in a moment where we are pausing for ammonia boil-off. That's the cooling that the Orion crew module uses to keep the astronauts cool inside the cabin as they wait to be taken out of the capsule. There's none in this one, but this would be a period in which that would happen. You can see the Navy boats. They are roughly outside of 120 yards from the capsule. They have equipment that will sniff out any hazardous gases near the Orion, and so they are holding in position until that ammonia boil-off happens. And then also in your view, you can see the MH-60 circling back around. It is leaning so the photographers inside and a high-resolution camera mounted on the side can get imagery of the capsule fresh from space. And my question to you, Shannon, is as we watch this continue to wait and for the Navy divers to get closer, thoughts of Artemis 2 now come to mind. You've heard folks have been talking about it. Rob has been discussing it with many of the leadership around NASA. People want to know, well, who are the astronauts going to be for Astronaut 2?
Yeah.
So, any idea?
That is the question. No, I have no idea. Once we get this capsule back, we'll look it over and we'll be able to determine when Artemis 2 will actually be able to launch. And once we know that launch date, we'll figure out the right time to name the crew based on the training flow.
So there's actually a period of training in which you have to do a set amount of time to get ready for that, but really predicated on Artemis 2 and that launch date?
Absolutely. We don't want to have the crew just spinning their wheels if Artemis 2 is going to be a long way out, but I don't think it will be. So I would say sometime in the next 6 months maybe. Is it just a guess? Don't hold me to it. We might be naming the crew.
All right, very good. Shannon Walker, NASA astronaut, thanks for joining us today. One quick update and note, the recovery team was looking at the possibility of recovering the parachutes as well as the forward bay cover, but that is not going to happen this time. They did mark their locations, but they did slip below the surface of the ocean, and so no recovery of the parachutes or the forward bay cover. That's it from right here on the USS Portland. Rob, we'll send it back to you.
Daryl Nail on the deck of the USS Portland with NASA astronaut Shannon Walker. It's been almost an hour since Orion splashed down. Everything with the entry and splashdown went by the book. If you weren't with us for the final minutes of Orion's descent toward the Pacific Ocean, we have a replay after the deployment of the 3 main chutes, which were pulled out in sequential fashion after pilot parachutes and drogue chutes were deployed. The main chutes came out. They reefed in perfect fashion, slowly descending towards the splashdown that was marked at 11:40 a.m. Central Time, 9:40 a.m. Pacific Time, at a point about 5 nautical miles or so from the USS Portland, west of Baja California. Orion entered the Earth's atmosphere traveling 25 times the speed of sound. It decelerated to a splashdown velocity of just under 100 miles an hour. It was a very gentle splashdown for Orion. All of its entry milestones were performed in perfect fashion. 2 blackout periods in which the plasma around Orion built up, preventing data and communications with the spacecraft as a natural function of the heat of re-entry, which was about 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, twice as much as re-entering space shuttles and other crewed vehicles have experienced. But although some analysis must be performed now, and there's the splashdown itself as it occurred, analysis, as you'll hear in a moment from our next guest, must be conducted to make sure that everything went as had been prescribed on the heat shield particularly. And there's a live view of Orion as the Navy boats with the Navy divers and other recovery personnel begin to approach the spacecraft. With us here in Mission Control is Michelle Zahner, the Orion Mission Planning Lead from the Vehicle Integration Office. Michelle, thank you for joining us today. And I guess the natural and the big question is, unbelievable that all this just ticked off in trip hammer fashion the way it was designed.
Yes, it was an incredible mission. So we accomplished all of our major mission objectives. The vehicle performed every bit as well as we hoped, and even better in a lot of ways. So as an example, the solar rays generated more power throughout the flight than we expected. So this is the furthest any human-rated spacecraft has ever gone, and that required a lot of complex analysis and mission planning and trajectory planning ahead of the mission, and to see it all come together and have such a successful test mission was amazing.
Michelle, it was a test flight, of course. There was a lot of risk involved, an elevated risk because there was no crew on board, and you could take, I shouldn't say liberties, but you could expand the envelope of what you needed to do in order to acquire the data that you were looking for in order to set the stage for the next mission when a crew will be on board. From a vehicle standpoint, sitting in these mission management teams, sitting with your engineers on a day-to-day basis, how much data did you acquire, and how long do you think it's going to take to pore over this so you write the textbook of Artemis 1?
Yeah, we acquired a ton of data during the mission. So one of the first things that we'll do post-mission is take several months to go back through that data, really dissect it, and understand the vehicle performance. You know, we did a lot of testing and analysis prior to the mission, but nothing really compares to seeing the vehicle perform in the harsh space environment. So that's certainly going to be our first focus after the mission is looking at all that data. And as you mentioned, you know, we pushed the vehicle further than we probably would with the crew on board, but through that, we learned a lot. We learned that the vehicle is more robust than we thought in many areas. And so taking that information and expanding our operational envelope will help as we go forward to more complex missions in the future.
And in the Orion Vehicle Integration Office, for yourself and your colleagues, it's almost like wearing two hats. You have to go back and pour